So after the SS3 ban, there was a large swath of bans limiting and erratas that happened, primarily centered around a particular mechanic. So when set 4 came out, they introduced the swap mechanic. Now the premise of the mechanic was that you were going to start with a 1-drop that would transition itself into a 2-drop and then swap into a 3-drop, a 4-drop, a 5-drop, then an 8-drop to win the game. And it was supposed to take place over several turns to get you from 1 to 8 by turn 4 or 5. And as a concept, it was a really cool mechanic. It allowed you to cheat a little bit on energy. It was a Goku lineage special. But then something happened, something that was rather unintentional. And that is an entire format or entire engine was created that killed formats going forward. So before we could talk about 1-2 swap or storm, we got to discuss the first thing, which is that Red had similar decks to Storm in the past. I'll show you one for example. So in the set 3 format, because I personally had a hatred for, Mecha Frieza and SS3 and all that stuff, I ran this deck, which was the Double Strike Goku that also was from the draft box that would attempt to try to kill people on turn, 2 or 3 using offensive untapping with Unyielding Spirit Trunks and Senzu Bean to play out Kabas and this guy right here and Mighty Mask for card advantage. And this deck was cool. It did a lot of work, but it was always missing something. And then the first card in the list of busted cards we're going to talk about was printed. And that card was none other than the Legendary Flute. So the Legendary Flute came around and it drew you a card by returning one of your battle cards to your hand. So a deck like that deck I just showed you, let's go right over to it. You had a Kaba, you took a life, you swung with it, but you had no way of guaranteeing you had a second Kaba unless you had Flute, which was able to return this Kaba to your hand, draw your card to allow you to replay the Kaba again and get another swing in. Later on, this was done with intensifying power trunks. Kaba was relegated to a 2 of. Some changes were made and you had Blue-Red Hirudegarn. And Blue-Red Hirudegarn was a very strong deck, but eventually 2 more cards were printed. So what was printed was Bardock the Progenitor and Scrambling Assault Son Goten. So when these 2 cards were printed, combined with the untapping prowess of Unyielding and Bean and the resetting ability of Legendary Flute, a monster was created. This is the deck we often call Storm. Sometimes you call it 1-2 swap, but this deck basically ran roughshod over the Dragon Ball Super card game. If your deck was not built specifically to beat this deck, or you weren't playing this deck, you were not playing the game at the time. This deck with very little effort and not even a ton of skill, because this was probably the first truly helmet deck in the game, you could get wins against most people. You could play this, the general premise was you would play Bardock, you would take a life, you would swing for 10, you would swap Bardock to your hand to make Goten. Goten would swing, get you a card, and then you would usually combo with Unyielding Spirit Trunks to untap an energy to play Bardock again to take another life, swing with it, swap into another Goten, swing with Goten, get a card, and then depending on what the situation was, if you were on turn 2, it's possible that you charged the blue, and then you would beam to untap both your energy, then you would play Bardock again, you would take the life, you would swing, and then if you didn't have another Goten, you would flute the Goten to your hand, swap Bardock into Goten, Goten would swing, it would get you another card, and then you would play Bardock again to take a life, swing, you would then untap 2 with your leader, and then you would just keep the cycle going. And when you did that, it created so many attacks that your opponent's defenses couldn't possibly hold up. Now you gotta consider, at that time, there were very few floodgates in the game. The only one that really existed was Flying Nimbus. We didn't have Topo, you didn't have Dormant, and you didn't have Protector to People or all these other cards that we would have now to be able to deal with a deck that tries to do something like this today. And even though we have those cards to be able to do it, you have to be running them, right? And if you're not running them and you were playing this full power deck today, you would probably just crush any deck that was put in front of you if they didn't have an inkling that this was coming and didn't have the cards in order to deal with it. So Yes, almost unbeatable unless you checked for the mirror, where you, instead of running the 4 minus Killy zones, you ran like 2 copies of Nimbus and 2 copies of Bardock Ape to give yourself the ability to floodgate their turn and to block an attack, to then be able to go into your turn and do all your swap shenanigans while your opponent didn't have Nimbus energy up. So with that being said, Bandai had a lot of decisions to make as far as what they need to hit to bring the power level of this deck back down. So looking back at all these cards, the first thing they did was go, well, the issue is Flute. If you hit Flute, it will make the deck power come in line with other decks. That was an extremely naive thought process because you only needed to see 1 Flute and they gave you Flute at 1. The other thing that happened was because Flute was at 1, we were able to run other swap pieces. So you will go Bardock not only into Goten, but you also go Bardock into the 2-cost 15k Goku for swap, which you'll see in another deck slide coming up. So after they realized that none of that did anything and this deck was still outrageous and still winning, they said, well, we're gonna outright ban Flute. Nobody argued with that. And then they said, we're gonna get rid of your untapping with Unyielding Spirit of Trunks, and we're gonna get rid of your hand advantage with Scrambling Assaults on Goten. We're gonna leave Bean, we're gonna leave Bardock the Progenitor, and that should be enough. And to their credit, it kind of was. Except they didn't realize what the true issue was. And that issue was the efficiency of the 1-2 swap engine between Bardock and any 2-drop that was able to be turned sideways and be offensive. So once that time passed, suddenly we had this deck come up. Broly Height of Mastery. Does something seem familiar with this deck? But if you have a keen eye, you'll see that the deck involves Bardock the Progenitor swapping into a 15k Goku. And in this deck, we see also multiple banned cards. So was Bardock banned here? No, Bardock wasn't banned here. Bardock was left alive while they banned Shugesh, while they banned Bad Ring Laser, because Bad Ring Laser plus, a finishing condition like Height of Mastery or Victory Strike or something was, kind of stupid. You just swing Bad Ring Laser, their negate didn't happen, and you would kill them. So they banned Bad Ring, they banned Shugesh, they limit Cold Bloodlust to 1 because it felt that it interacted with other boss monsters too well, which it did at the time. Even after this deck kept going for a very long while until eventually it got power crept. So Bardock needed a new home. He needed a new person to call Master or Daddy, and then he went over to this deck. Super Shenron. Bardock the Progenitor, of course, coming down, doing his thing, and then what happened? They said, well, I don't think it's really Bardock the Progenitor's fault. I think the real issue is a Child's Wish. We're gonna ban a Child's Wish because a Child's Wish into Bulma is free. Again, nobody's questioning that. And by doing that, we'll be able to have this deck come more in line. And we're also going to errata the leader to something that is impossible to accomplish in the game. And when you looked at it, you go, okay, well, I see what they're doing here. It makes sense. But eventually they came around. They realized that Bardock the Progenitor was a problem and they banned him. So in banning him, they ended a reign of terror that lasted, I think, close to an entire year, if not almost 2 years. Bardock the Progenitor swapping into a 15k Goku, being splashed into numerous decks and killing people. Now, you might think, oh man, that's crazy. But it got so bad. I remember being at an Atlantic City Regional. And at that Atlantic City Regional, they were looking for cool decks to put on stream. So, our store team, which again I wasn't on because I'm a scrub, decided to play movie promo Gogeta. And everybody was like, oh wow, they're playing promo Gogeta? We gotta put that on stream. And the stream guy was like, yeah man, this looks interesting. It's movie promo Gogeta. And then they charged yellow and said Bardock the Progenitor. That's just how pervasive it was. And it was playing against a regular Shenron deck running Bardock the Progenitor swapped into a 2-drop 15k. Thank you that we don't have to live through that right now. So that's it for today. I'll catch you next time. And this is VG Time signing out.